The mind is a great mystery. From old sages to modern-day psychologists, from religion to science, all have tried to define the mind in their own way, and have made attempts to describe its true nature and properties. The concept of mind is different in many different cultures and religious traditions. Some of them believe that the human individual is a combination of the physical body and soul. The soul is an immaterial essence, which is part of the greater soul of the universe. The mind is something seen as the equivalent of the soul, and the human mind is considered as an extension of the greater mind of the universe. This conception of mind is the basis of spirituality. Philosophy examines thoughts and human experiences through reasoned arguments. Psychology approaches the subject by studying the intellectual and emotional phenomena through scientific experiments. Medical science looks at the mind as an activity of brain cells and a highly complex play of chemical substances. In spite of all this elusiveness in defining the mind, some elements of mind are quite clearly identifiable, and it is not hard to determine how they function. By focusing deeply on our cognitive and emotional processes, we can develop a metaphorical model of the human mind, which can describe the complex functions of various elements of the mind in a simple way. We can use the metaphor of the lake to explain the way various elements of human mind function. The simile of the lake has been vaguely used for the mind to describe its depths, but I have developed this analogy properly. In fact, the lake is a wonderful analogy to describe various mental processes, both normal and abnormal. The human mind is like a lake. Our subconscious mind is like the bottom of this lake. The negative emotions of fear, anger, hatred, jealousy, and guilt are like thorny cactuses, rooted in the subconscious. The body of water is the field of activity, where all our conscious and unconscious mental functions occur. Our conscious mental activity, such as routine thought processes and cognitive functions, are like the boat sailing on the surface of the lake. The surface of the mind should be calm, smooth, and clear of all obstructions, so as to ensure the smooth sailing of our conscious mental functions. You can only see the surface of the lake. Everything else is hidden in the deeper and darker parts of the water. Millions of activities are going on in the depths of the water, on the bottom of the lake. The base is full of clutter and a variety of plants and bushes. There are thorny cactuses, as well as colorful roses. There are a variety of rocks, rubble, and debris gathered over the bottom. There's a lot of litter and garbage that is settled to the bottom as well. The dust of all the events that have ever happened in the lake have settled in the base of the lake. Vibrations from all the waves, ripples, and turbulences that were ever created in the water have left their effects on the bottom of the lake. Everything from the surface eventually has sunk to the bottom. The soil at the base of the lake allows every kind of seed to grow. It accepts everything. Thorny cactuses can be grown on the bottom, as well as colorful roses. Whatever you deposit in the bottom of the lake will grow over there. if you nourish the seeds of joy, peace, happiness, love, and security, the flowers of love, peace, and happiness will grow over there, and their bright colors and fragrances will fill the waters of the lake. If you consistently nourish them, they will become evergreen, and peace and pleasantness will become a permanent feature of the lake. On the contrary, if you nourish the seeds of fear, anger, hatred, and jealousy, you will reap a dreadful harvest. By nourishing the seedlings of fear, hatred, jealousy, doubt, and guilt, tiny seedlings will grow to become gigantic, thorny cactuses. They thrive on the food of unpleasant experiences, the poisonous food of misery, frustration, worries, insult, failure, and disappointment feeds the cactuses of fear, anger, hatred, and guilt. As a result, they grow larger and larger. Disproportionately grown, they will distort the normal paradigm of the mind lake. In the mind lake, if cactuses are of optimal size and remain below the surface, there will be no problems. However, if they grow too large and start protruding above the surface, they start disrupting the smooth sailing of the boat of the thought process. We all have negative emotions seated in our minds. However, the quantity of negative emotions is not the same for everyone. People have different quantities of negative emotions in their minds, and everyone has their own proportion of them. It is the quantity and proportion of these emotions in us that differs and makes us different individuals from one another. As long as the amount of fear, anger, hatred, guilt, and other negative emotions accumulated in the mind remains below a certain threshold, there will not be a problem in the routine functioning of the mind. Some amounts of negative emotions are quite normal. However, when the quantities of negative emotions accumulated in the subconscious pass beyond certain limits, they start hampering the normal flow of conscious mental activities. The turmoil created by them in the deeper parts of the mind begins reaching to the conscious layer of the mind. The emotional upheavals start disturbing your thought processes and the stability of your moods. The accumulated emotions, time and again, start erupting on the surface in the form of bouts of anger, panic attacks, general anxiety, and feelings of disgust and mental restlessness. When this process becomes frequent or permanent, you're said to have a mental illness. Our subconscious mind is largely shaped by our childhood and adolescence. What we are reaping today was sown in our early days. The seeds of the present harvest were deposited and nourished in our childhood and younger years. A happy, secure, and fulfilled life provides nourishment to the emotions of love, joy, hope, security, and serenity. And an unfortunate, insecure, emotionally unfulfilled, and repressed life full of unpleasant experiences and suffering nourishes the cactus of fear, anger, hatred, jealousy, and guilt. The more you nourish them, the more they will grow. When your subconscious mind is stuffed with fear, anger, and repression, frustration, and unhappiness, it will return to you anxiety, depression, phobias, panic attacks, obsessive-compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, and psychosis. As we live through the days of our lives, we experience a variety of emotions every now and then. All of us experience negative emotional extremes at times. Often, we cannot fully express them. It's rare that we can fully vent them. Society does not allow you to express everything. You cannot always express your anger. You cannot always express your hatred and disgust. You cannot always give expression to impulses of your sexual energy. Most often, you have to suppress them. You keep on pushing them into the deeper layers of your mind. You keep on throwing them into the storehouse of the subconscious. Whatever rubbish you have been throwing into the subconscious is yearning to come out. Whatever you could not express, could not fulfill, or could not resolve has been buried alive in the deeper layers of the mind. It is convulsing there in the depths of the mind. It behaves as a living creature. Suppressed, it wants to be expressed. Incomplete, it wants to be completed. Unresolved, it wants to be resolved. Unrecognized, it wants to be recognized. It finds excuses to express itself. It will react to every stimulus that provides the opportunity to make its existence known. Anger and hatred tries to burst out to the surface. Fear passively taints every thought you think, every judgment you conclude, every decision you make. In our younger years, many of us are goaded to belittle the emotional aspect of our being. If our feelings were hurt, we would often hear from our parents that we should forget it, or ignore it, or that it doesn't matter. Denying these feelings, however, does not make them evaporate or go away. By repressing them, you bury them alive in the deeper mind. You have stuffed the negative emotional energy into the subconscious. The generalized anxiety, bouts of anxiety, panic attacks, dark depression, or stress of the unknown cause that we suffer from are oftentimes the painful convulsions of those buried feelings. You try to find out external causes, and often you cannot, because the pain is actually from within. These dumped negative feelings affect our life, not only every day, but every single moment. What we may not realize is that the negative emotions we might have experienced long ago may still be affecting us in a very subtle way. In other words, these negative energies trapped in our mind literally determine the way we lead our lives, the choices we make, and ultimately, the results we get. The accumulated negative emotions in the basement of your mind exert an unseen yet profound influence over the things we do and feel. Your life is being controlled from a control room that is itself out of control. These accumulated negative emotional energies have their well-defined shapes and power. The negative emotional energy of every emotion has different essential characteristics that are specific to it. It has its own feel. It has its own way by which it distresses your body and mind. The manifestations can be seen in the sufferer's life. They well up often and take charge of your mental state. At times, you might feel that a vague sense of unease is a part of your life and disturbing you in an undefinable way. You may feel that you are struggling under a heavy weight and are unable to locate the cause in your immediate circumstances. Accumulated negative emotions are the invisible cause of much emotional and physical suffering. They often can cause pain and fatigue. The accumulated negative emotions continue to come in the way of smooth goings-on of life, serenity, and peace of mind. It creates turbulence and pressure inside the mind. Even worse, accumulated negative emotions trigger unwanted thoughts, which continue to swirl in your head, and unpleasant feelings do not leave you, even in the absence of an external negative stimulus. Anger starts oozing on trivial thoughts. The slightest threat is enough to create an enormous amount of fear in you. Your mind almost always has an undercurrent of anger, hatred, fear, or regret, depending upon which item you have more of in the store of subconscious and which is currently activated. However, the issue is not the negative emotions themselves. Everyone has them. The issue is their accumulation in large quantity in the subconscious mind, which leads to mental illness. The purpose of all mental therapies is to make the surface of the mind lake clear of obstructions, so that the boat of conscious mental functions can sail smoothly. A clear surface of mind means your thought processes can flow smoothly. You can assess normally. You can focus on things normally. Your moods are stable, and you have the normal rhythm of feeling positive and negative emotions. One solution to make the surface clear is to remove the cactuses which are popping onto the surface of the mind lake. This is the solution that we mostly adopt in our treatment approach. The conventional treatment approach to treating mental illness is to suppress the symptoms of the disease. Medications usually suppress the symptoms by making the patient drowsy, and therapies are aimed at managing the symptoms as they arise. The approach is symptomatic. This approach is like cutting the tops of the cactuses that are popping up on the surface of the mind lake. Apparently, it seems to be an easy and quick solution. Unfortunately, it is not as simple as it appears, because the cactuses have the tendency to grow again if you cut them. This is what we experience in conventional treatments of mental illness. You suppress the symptoms of the disease, but they start popping up again after some period of time. CBT and other therapies do work, but the fact is that symptoms return in most patients when they leave therapy. You have to continuously struggle with the symptoms. You are in a constant battle with the illness. You have to be vigilant at every moment. You're trying to manage the symptoms, but what is causing the symptoms is still there. When you put your guard down, the symptoms usually appear again. The cactuses will gradually grow once again when you stop pruning them. They have the tendency to regain their default size again. Our conventional approach is by and large a symptomatic treatment. This cannot possibly uproot the cactuses. It is not easy to change the basic structures and composition of the subconscious. You cannot remove all the poisonous ingredients that have been added to the soil of the subconscious over time. Whatever is in your biology cannot be eradicated, and whatever you have experienced in your environment throughout the course of months and years, unfortunately cannot be reversed. The attempts to cleanse the subconscious by psychoanalysis might work in rare individual cases, but its success in treating the mainstream mental illnesses is not convincing. My personal experience with this is very disappointing. Then what is the solution? What fundamental change in the paradigm of the mind can break the power of the accumulated restless emotional energy in the subconscious? Is it possible, with some mental techniques, to weaken or eliminate it? How can the negative emotional energy trapped in the subconscious be neutralized? The lasting solution would be to neutralize the turmoil where it arises. The real solution is not to struggle with each symptom of mental illness. The real solution is aimed at strengthening the vital mental force that could dissipate the power of restless negative energies in the subconscious. The real solution is in enhancing the quality of the medium in which all this activity takes place. The real solution is to raise the level of the water in the mind lake. Yes, by raising the level of the water, the protruding cactuses will be drowned deep in the water. By completely immersing them in the water, the surface will once again become clear. The cactus of anger, fear, hatred, and guilt will no more be reaching the surface to hamper the smooth movement of the boat of thought process. There is an element of the mind that is akin to the water in the lake, and by changing that element, we can change the entire paradigm of the mind. We can make a major shift in the way our mind functions. We can make mental illness disappear completely. If you could develop that element of mind, you would no longer have to treat mental illness symptomatically. You don't have to fight every symptom one by one. If you change that fundamental element, the mental illness will disappear in its totality. Just like by raising the level of water in the mind lake, you can drown all the cactuses of negative emotions in one go. If you were following the concept of mind lake, you must ask one question here. What is that element of mind that is represented by water in our analogy? In Mind Lake, water is the field in which all mental activities take place. We have come to understand that it is the most fundamental element of the Mind Lake paradigm. If the bottom of the lake represents the subconscious, the cactuses represent our negative emotions, and our conscious mental activity is like a boat sailing on the surface of the lake, then what does the water stand for if we apply this analogy to the human mind? What is that element of the mind that is analogous to water in the mind lake? Let's figure it out with the help of this scenario. Try to remember that first moment when you wake up in the morning. A great transition takes place in that moment. You cross over from one world to another. You leave one state of being and enter another state of being. From the world of darkness, you enter a world of light, as though you were non-existent and came back into existence, almost like you were just born. The first thing that you feel is the sense that you exist. You feel that you are. Then you open your eyes and take a look at your surroundings. You hear voices of other family members, children perhaps, or some clock or TV, any of the normal elements as you enter the world of wakefulness. A moment ago, you existed, but the awareness of existence was not there. You existed, but the essence, which is an essential condition for the perception of existence to take place, was simply not there. One thing has been added to your existence, that is, wakefulness or consciousness. Then your day begins. Throughout the day, you do a great many things. You work on your assignments, you read emails, you answer emails, and you discuss matters with your colleagues and your boss. You look, you hear, you judge, you evaluate, you calculate, you make decisions, and so on and so forth. Along with this, you undergo many changes of mood throughout the day. Sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're happy. At one moment, you're bursting with anger, and at other times, you're an embodiment of love and affection. At one time, you're enjoying every single moment of life, and at another time, you feel that life is just hell. All day long, various thoughts and images and colors continue to dance across the screen of your mind. Where was all this mind activity when you were in deep sleep? Where were your thoughts and feelings when you were asleep? Where were your perceptions, moods, and memories? Where was your anger and hatred when you were in deep sleep? Can you feel disgust, jealousy, and regret when you were in deep sleep or otherwise unconscious? Can you be sad, depressed, and jealous when you are fast asleep? Can you be happy, joyful, and delighted when you are in deep sleep or unconsciousness? No, you cannot. You perform all of these functions and feel all of these emotions when you are in a state of wakefulness. Thoughts and emotions can only be felt when you are conscious and awake. No observation and experience in any form is possible without this wakefulness or consciousness. Thoughts and emotions are secondary to consciousness. Thoughts and emotions take place in the medium of wakefulness or consciousness. Consciousness is the primary condition necessary for us to experience all of our thoughts and emotions. It is the basic essence which makes all mental life possible. Without consciousness, no mental life is possible. Without consciousness, there are no thoughts and there are no moods. There are no feelings. You do not feel anxiety when you are not awake. You do not have intrusive, painful thoughts when you are unconscious. You do not feel the darkness of depression when you are in deep sleep. You do not experience mood swings when you are in deep sleep. You cannot experience symptoms of mental illness when you are not conscious. During sleep, our consciousness is partially switched off. Our experience of thoughts, emotions, and moods disappears. When consciousness goes dormant, everything disappears with it. The moment you wake up, the stage is set again. When you first enter that state of wakefulness, all the mental processes, including feelings, moods, and thoughts, start off again. Anxiety, depression, waves of anger, emotional upheavals, worries, regrets, and other symptoms start gradually creeping in. The circus of mental illness starts once more on the stage of wakefulness or consciousness. Consciousness is the medium in which all this mental activity takes place. Our thoughts are like the waves and ripples in this field of consciousness. It is not difficult to understand that these ripples, splashes, and waves can only propagate in some medium, and consciousness is that medium. In MindLake, the whole drama of lake life takes place in the water. Water is the medium where everything happens. What water is to the lake, consciousness is to the mind. Without water, there will be no lake. Without consciousness, there will be no mind. By changing the quantity and quality of water, we can change the way things happen in the lake. By changing the state of consciousness or quality of consciousness, we can change the way things happen in our mind. We can change our experience of reality, and in turn, our experience of mental illness. How does this help in treating mental illness? As we know, in mental illness, there is too much quantity of negative emotions accumulated in the subconscious. Emotions, when activated, are disturbances in the field of consciousness. With expansion of consciousness, the disturbance created by negative emotions is diluted and dissipated. The disturbance created by the accumulated negative emotions is neutralized. The intensity of the turmoil that they create in the subconscious is dissipated, and the turbulence no longer has power to reach the conscious layer of the mind. Explosive emotional impulses are toned down because you have changed the properties of the medium in which the negative emotions were propagating. The turbulence created by your accumulated fear, anger, hatred, and guilt will be flooded with the waters of consciousness. Accumulated negative emotions can be diluted and dissolved in the expanded consciousness. When the turmoil created by accumulated negative emotion cannot reach the surface of the mind, the regular flow and rhythm of routine mental activities is restored. You no longer suffer from mental illness.